Fisherman by Brendan Bozeman. Why Tom, Captain Tom, had to be such an idiot all the time had always been a question for his brother Cal, but this time things were serious. Tom was drunk in his cabin in the morning, unable to get out of bed, throwing up on the floor in a combination of seasickness and drunken queasiness, screaming at Cal to get out. That may have been okay at home. Cal would just stay away from Tom and let him drink off the rest of the month. But this was crab season, and they were on the high seas. He needed to be on deck with the men. Worse than that, Cal, looking around for Tom's boots, found 3 sticks of dynamite in Tom's cabinet. "What the hell is there dynamite here for?" he said, kicking Tom's leg as it hung off the bed. "None of your damn business," he yelled, swiping wildly at him. "Don't flail around like that. You're not that drunk. Why dynamite?" "You'll see." Cal shook his head. He found Tom's boots stuffed between the foot of the bed and the wall and threw them at Tom's face. "If you aren't upstairs in 2 minutes, I'm dragging you up." Tom rose suddenly and tackled Cal, who easily dragged him up the galley steps and threw him on the deck. The others suppressed their laughter. Normally, Tom was fine on voyages. Sure, he drank his way through that dark, dark winter on shore. Who didn't? But this was work time. Money was flowing in those waters, and any man slacking off cost money. Cal leaned down close to Tom's ear. "Do your job, or I'm taking over, and your share's going to us." Tom dragged himself to his feet, went down for his boots, and returned with what he called a good face. A sailor with good face was ready in spite of any exhaustion or pain. He was ready, he told himself. He'd been asleep for 4 hours, and that would be plenty. Maybe a sip of fortitude here and there to keep his energy up. Cal was back at the limes to help haul up the cages. What really confused him was how Tom had managed to stay drunk for the whole voyage. Where was he keeping the whiskey? How was he sneaking it? Of course, no one kept tabs on anyone else per se, so that would be fairly easy. Tom had probably had a little taste when he went down for his boots. There were no questions from the men and no small talk as they went about their business. They had already been at this 3 days and probably hadn't slept more than 3 hours a night. That wasn't enough to beat a fisherman down, but it was enough to put the men on autopilot as they hauled in and emptied the cages. They just thought about the payday, and this time they had had a great run. No bad days at all. One thing you could say about Tom was that he had good instincts for where to find crabs. No one could figure out what was making Tom drink, though. Carter, one of the deckhands, thought it was his marriage. He said marriage problems started small and got big, and when someone starts drinking, it just builds momentum. The other hands, Bill and Clark, believed him. He'd gotten divorced the year before and had been through a good run of drinking. But that was on shore. Bringing it to the boat was as irresponsible as it gets. They didn't know Tom that well. They knew of him as a captain, but this was their first trip with him. They wanted to make it through to payday and didn't care what was making him crazy. It was in the process of hauling one of the cages over the side that Carter suddenly called out to stop everything. He stood back a little, then climbed up on top of the cage. "There's someone caught up there." The others didn't know if he had said someone or something, but he wouldn't yell about a thing, and if it were someone, he would have said there was a body up there, not someone. Carter pulled out his knife and cut some ropes. As he pulled this thing to the edge, Bill and Clark could tell it was a man. He was naked, but his body had the greenish-brown color of sea mud, and he had the long hair and beard you would expect to see on an outcast. He seemed to squirm around as Carter pulled him, but Bill and Clark assumed he was dead as they reached up to take the body and lay it on the deck. To Bill, the man felt limp, so in theory he could either be alive or recently drowned. He certainly didn't look alive, and if he were drowned and limp, that would mean rigor mortis had taken place and gone away, which takes 2 days. But that didn't make sense, because in 2 days, he would have been getting eaten by all kinds of things down on the bottom. All he could see were some small white cuts. When they stepped back from the man, he kept twitching, as if somehow he were barely alive. Carter leaned over him just as Cal came up to look, and the man's eyes opened. "Oh, God," said Tom. "Get him downstairs." Bill and Clark carried him behind Cal, who took him to the captain's quarters, because it was the biggest, and pulled the sheets back. They laid the man down and covered him. Soon, the man began shivering, and he balled himself up into the fetal position, facing the wall. He said nothing. "Bill, get him a coffee," said Cal. They piled some more blankets on him. Tom stomped down the stairs and was about to say something, but Cal gave him a shut-up look. Cal pushed the man's shoulder. "You okay, mister?" The man said nothing, but his eyes were open and staring at the wall. Bill came back with the coffee, and Tom said, "Cal, call rescue. They're not going to send anyone out, I don't think, but let them know. I'll see if I can get him to talk and get him into the shower, if he'll go." The rest went up and got back to work. The guy wouldn't drink the coffee or talk, but he was breathing, so Tom took a quick sip of whiskey and went back up on deck. He came back in now and then to check on him and take another swig, and after about an hour, the man spoke. "What the hell kind of ship is this?" Tom leaned over him. "I'm not sure I'd call this a ship, but it's the Windy. Where did you come from?" "The Elbridge." He looked like he wasn't sure if it was the right name. "How'd you end up in the water?" "Swept overboard in a storm." "When was that? There hasn't been a storm here in a week. How'd you survive that long?" The man didn't respond. He just looked around the room. He stretched out and sat up a bit in the bed. "That was a long time ago." He put his hand through his hair and pulled it down over his eyes, marveling at its length. "That's a nasty wound there," said Tom, pointing to the man's arm, which had a red and white gouge on it. It looked badly infected. He yelled up the stairs, "Bill, get the med kit." The man said, "It doesn't heal." Bill came with the kit quickly. "Look," said Tom, "are you hungry?" The man shook his head. "Well, get up and take a shower. Then we can take care of that wound. Bill will give you some of his clothes." "Yo, Cap, I don't know," said Bill. "Jesus, it's a man overboard. He needs clothes." He looked at the man. "Take a little of this." He reached into one of the drawers below the bed and brought out a half-empty pint of whiskey. The man took a swig, and then Tom showed him where the shower was. "This is the shower?" "Yes, go in." "It showers water?" "Yeah, of course, go in." The man went in and stood there for a minute. Then he opened the curtain. "Is there a bucket?" Tom and Cal were talking quietly on deck. Cal said, "So, rescue said we should just bring him in when we come back. It'll only be a couple of days, but they'll pick him up if they're out here for some other reason." What the hell was this about not knowing how to use a shower? I don't know, some kind of amnesia. I literally had to show him how the handles worked. How is he not dead? Did he tell you when he went overboard? Not really. I don't know what happened to his clothes. He should have been dead in 20 minutes in this water. Bill came up the stairs and motioned them down. The man was asleep on the bed, but clothed and showered. His skin was the same greenish-brown sludge color as before. Tom leaned down and saw that it was leathery, and it had gouges and whitish wounds as though small animals had been biting it all over. I was cleaning his wound when he passed out. Not from pain, he just fell asleep. But look, in the wound was a small, bright green fish. It wriggled slightly. Can we pull it off? Asked Tom. I tried a little. It's pretty well attached, but look at it. Have you seen anything like this before? There's a lot of fish in the sea. No, but look. It was strange. It was only an inch long and had 2 extra dorsal fins. There was a gold band near its head. I've never seen anything like that before, said Bill. Neither have I, said Tom. But I'm not an expert on tiny fish. I've never seen that either, said Cal. It looks more like a tropical fish. Let's at least keep it in a bowl. Cal went to the mess and found a mixing bowl that he filled halfway with seawater. Bill put a cloth covered in whiskey on the fish, and after a few seconds, it let go. He scraped it into a paper cup and dumped it into the bowl. It swam back and forth angrily before settling at the bottom. What now? Said Cal. Just let him sleep. Let's get some saran wrap on that bowl and put it in a drawer. I'll check back on him every few minutes till he wakes up. The rest of the day was normal, and after 5 or 6 hours, the men had almost forgotten about the new arrival. Tom went down occasionally, and each time came back shaking his head. Cal snorted as he guessed Tom was using it as an excuse to get another swig of whiskey with each trip. Finally, Cal followed him down quietly. Tom was sitting at the foot of the bed, leaning over a drawer. The castaway was asleep. Tom! Tom's head snapped up, and in the same motion he shoved the drawer closed. Cal went over to it. More whiskey? Cal yanked the drawer open. It was heavier than expected, and he saw not a bottle, but the bowl containing the fish. Tom had been staring at it. What's up with that? I'm just trying to figure out what it is. I looked online. I can't find anything like it. Cal was puzzled by that. They got internet via satellite, and it was expensive. Not that it would make too much difference in the big picture, but still. Tom, seriously, what? But Cal stopped talking. Tom was staring at the fish, zoned out. Cal slid the drawer closed. Tom, you've got to come to your senses. What is your deal? You actually haven't been drinking, have you? Just then the castaway said, Stay away from that fish. Believe me. There are more like it. All right, said Cal. It's about time we got some answers from you. Sit up. The man hinged himself up on his elbows, smiling uncertainly. Now, you say you were on the Elbridge. I've never heard of it. What kind of boat are we talking about? It's a sloop. We had supplies for Seward. Supplies? Supplies go to Seward by road. Oh, so now there's a road. Cal looked at Tom for a moment and then said, When did you go over? I don't even remember anymore. It's been so long. What's your name? Nathaniel Smith. What kind of boat was it? I said it was a sloop. Now I've got a question for you. Nathaniel was putting up a sailor's bravado, but he was not very convincing. His eyes kept darting around the cabin. What form of ship is this? All metal? Cal hesitated. Yeah, all metal. What else would it be? What's that roaring sound? That would be the engine, Nathaniel. But there's no smokestack. It's a diesel engine. Tom put his hand on Cal's shoulder. Let me talk to him. He looked into the man's eyes. I think I understand you. Just tell me, how long were you down there? Down. That's right, way down. I got swept off, and I had a board and floated. And then those damn fish came. They bit everywhere. And I couldn't breathe or move. And I floated off and drowned. You drowned? But you didn't die. No, not that. I drowned, but I could still see. And I could move a little. I could come up for air once in a while, but it was no relief. And that went on and on. It was winter and then spring. And no one found me. And my clothes ripped off or rotted little by little. I saw the shore sometimes, or a ship, but they never saw me. And I finally stopped swimming, and I sank. I sank deep down, and I could still see, but it was too dark to see. It was quiet. And I came up sometimes in storms, but never for long. And I could never remember how I got there, not for more than a few seconds. Then I'd forget. I have no idea how long I was there. But the fish just keep biting, and they bite. The man dropped back onto his pillow, exhausted. We got the fish off you. It's in a bowl, said Tom. New ones will grow. They put eggs in you, and they grow. They never go away. I wish they would eat me, but they just bite and bite. Tom and Cal were silent. They glanced at each other and back at the man. Don't look at that fish, said Nathaniel. Just throw it back, or kill it. Then throw me back. Your box pulled me up. I'll just go back down. It's that easy. I'll just sink down and forget everything. Tom turned back to Cal. His face was calm, though it wasn't the good face. It was distant, somehow. Cal shouted up to the deck. Bill, come down here. There was no response. Carter, he bellowed. Come down and keep watch on this castaway. Carter did appear, if slowly. Tom and Cal went to the bridge. There, Tom looked up the L bridge on the internet. The L bridge, he said, was a small supply ship that was in service in the Northwest during the 1880s and 90s. Kind of more than a sloop by the tonnage, but not big. He looked up at Cal and said, So what do you want for lunch? What the hell? Is it some kind of a time traveler? I don't think so. I think he lives forever. Poor bastard. To think he's been drinking with Davy Jones every second of our lives and more. Damn. Look, I'll keep an eye on him and try to get some more info. With that, Tom left the bridge and went down to the cabin. Carter left the second he saw him and went to the lines. Did that guy say anything to you? Asked Al. Carter avoided eye contact and said, That's one weird dude. And then went back to his business with aggression. Cal decided to just work and try to clear his mind. Cage after cage went down. Cage after cage came up. A full cycle. Finally, he went back to Tom's cabin. He entered upon a very strange scene. First, he heard Nathaniel saying, Stay away, I say, stay away. As Cal got to the bottom of the steps, he saw Nathaniel on the bed, his knees drawn up to his chest, staring at Tom, who was holding a bottle of whiskey in one hand and staring at the fish. Tom! Tom didn't answer. Nathaniel, what's wrong with him? He can't stop looking. You gotta kill me. I can't go back to that. Look at it. It's hell. Cal went over to Tom and pulled his face away from the fish. Tom looked dazed, semi-drunk, but somehow also lost to himself. He groaned a little when Cal looked at him. "Stay away," said Nathaniel. Tom dragged at the bottle and gave a guttural groan as he turned back toward the fish. "What the hell is going on here?" yelled Cal. Just then, Nathaniel pulled a flare gun out from under the covers. Cal looked to the wall, where it was usually stored, and saw that Nathaniel must have taken it down. Nathaniel pointed the barrel into his own mouth and pulled the trigger. "Oh, shit!" screamed Cal, reaching for a fire extinguisher. Carter, Bill, and Clark came down the steps within seconds and threw Nathaniel on the ground, holding him there as Cal discharged the extinguisher into his face. Tom, meanwhile, shoved one hand through the saran wrap into the bowl and grabbed the fish. Nathaniel writhed on the ground, moaning and grabbing his mouth. Tom stared around at the rest, who froze, unsure what to do. "I just need to go up on deck for a minute," said Tom. The rest of the men put Nathaniel on the bed and then scattered in different directions. Bill looked for the med kit, Clark looked for something to tie Nathaniel up with, and Carter and Cal rushed after Tom. Nathaniel was screaming and could not be tied. They called Carter back down to help. On deck, Cal went to his brother, who was at the railing, looking down into the water. Cal approached him cautiously. "Tom, what's up?" Tom put his arms on the rail. As he continued to move toward Tom, Cal slowly lifted his arms to bear hug his brother from behind. Tom looked at his hand. The green fish was attached to it, writhing and digging itself in. Blood flowed, but Tom did not react. He looked back into the water. "Tom, look at me. Don't do anything crazy." Tom turned for a moment to Cal and said, "It's there." Then he threw himself headfirst into the water. "Man overboard!" cried Cal. The other men all came on deck, leaving Nathaniel behind. They threw rescue floats and looked into the water, but they could not see Tom. They looked at each other in knowing horror. A man who slips into the water can almost always be saved. But if he doesn't swim, a solid man like Tom will sink like a rock. They called in vain and threw lines into the water. Cal took off his coat and dove in, hoping to glimpse Tom and drag him back. He dove down and came up several times. The other men grew quiet, and even the wind and the sea seemed to calm. Behind them, they heard a scream of despair. Nathaniel was standing on the deck not 20 feet away, howling from his blood-soaked mouth, blood that was black and rotten. He was barely able to say, "It won't take me again. Not again." They noticed then that Tom's dynamite was stuffed into his shirt, and the fuse was lit. They dove in every direction for cover, and in a few seconds, the deafening blast blew Nathaniel into bits that flew in every direction, sailing high above the boat and landing in the sea and on the deck. Cal pulled himself back on board, and the other men stood up to look at the scene. "God damn," said Bill. "What do we do?" He looked at Cal. "I'm going to take pictures of this mess. Bill, you're going to tell the Coast Guard what happened. Then I'm going to shovel what's left into a box, and if they want it, they can have it." These things were done. Rescue sent a helicopter and some boats out to do a search for Tom. Nothing was ever found. Not that day, not the next, not even days and days later, when a bloated body would normally have floated to the surface. The Coast Guard did, in fact, want that box of what was left of Nathaniel. Captain Rogers personally took notes on the incident, and he asked Cal to open the box. It was just out of curiosity, because the morticians were going to do the real work with it, but Cal later wished he hadn't. There were just a few body parts, a hand, part of a leg, 3 separate fingers, and some guts and other gore that could not be identified. But there was one more thing. Part of Nathaniel's face. It was just part of the cheek and forehead and a badly damaged eye. It looked like it had been stepped on. Captain Rogers said, "Ugh," and turned away. But Cal saw something more, or at least he thought he did. The eye moved a little, and it had a small sparkle to it. Cal swore the eye looked right at him, saw him. Years later, Cal would wonder if he had imagined it, or if he had built up the story little by little as he awoke from dreams of the same image night after night. He would see the eye and would feel Nathaniel's mind pleading to him to smash the eye with a hammer, begging to allow him to forget himself. He would wake up and then imagine his brother's eye, deep below the boats, staring up, able to see, but unable to penetrate the darkness.